This is Block 10, the 60s, Section 3, Social Upheaval with Students for a Democratic Society. A lot of radicals simply stuck to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and had a really nice time of it. But some of them took themselves seriously enough to launch a very powerful political movement. This guy on the left is a guy by the name of Tom Hayden, who was at the head of an organization called Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS. And SDS was supposed to completely remake American politics, that the young people would rally behind SDS and overthrow the corporate-controlled and military-controlled government of the United States. It started as a movement of democratic socialists and idealists, who wanted to end the Cold War. They wanted to eliminate racism. They wanted to eliminate nuclear weapons. They wanted to eliminate racial and economic inequality. Their biggest thing, of course, was the Vietnam War. And as the war escalated, their war on America escalated as well. By 1966, members of SDS, the leadership and the rank and file, were actively supporting the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong in their war against the United States. That if you went to SDS meetings, you could always find North Vietnamese flags flying, people supporting Ho Chi Minh in their war against the United States. These radical political goals, surrender to the Soviet Union, was commonly, it was understood that at the very least, SDS radicals saw the United States and the Soviet Union as equally bad countries, kind of a pox on both their houses point of view, and they justified this belief on what they saw as America's corporate values, military values, America's racism, sexism, imperialism against the Indians, imperialism against, other people around the world. And they looked at these things and said, this is not a great country, this country is awful. And we're going to change it. We're going to eliminate all of these things. By 1967, many of their political goals had turned into active resistance. They occupied college administration buildings, they occupied corporate offices, they attacked and harassed military recruiters and corporate recruiters on campus. By 1968-1969, the movement splits, and the movement splits over the degree of violence that SDS members were willing to undertake in order to achieve their goals. They all thought the revolution was coming, and their music kind of heralded it, but they were split over how much they should actively be helping the revolution. Many of them were jealous of the Black Panthers. They saw the Panthers as people willing to pick up the gun, as they said, and actively fight for revolution in the United States. And they didn't hide that fact. They said, we want a revolution in the United States. We want to overthrow the whole rotten structure, they said. And the movement split, and the radicals, the side of the radicals that decided to advance their cause violently were known as the Weathermen, or the Weather Underground. And the Weathermen, or the Weather Underground, got their name from a song that said, "You don't need a weatherman to tell you which way the wind is blowing," was the lyric in the song. And they said, the wind is blowing towards revolution, and we are going to help lead it. They cited the Black Panthers as an inspiration. These white children of middle-class privilege took it upon themselves to bring down the system that had allowed them to become radicals in the first place. And in their brief history, they bombed army barracks, they bombed police stations, they bombed military recruitment centers, they bombed banks, they bombed other institutions of the system that they so despised. And they killed several dozen people. As revolutionaries, though, they were not all too successful. Most Americans, rolled their eyes at them. Many Americans, especially many conservative Americans, thought they all ought to be, shot as traitors, probably. But the bombings kind of came to a halt when the leadership of the Weather Underground blew itself up. And you can see here's some of their posters. Bring the war home. Students for a Democratic Society. They're actively advocating for a revolution in the United States. Here's some of these are some of the most famous weathermen. William Ayers, who is now a buddy of the president. Bernadine Dorn married William Ayers, and had at their wedding they had a big giant cake that said "Smash Monogamy" on their wedding cake. But they were serious fugitives. They killed several people. But the leadership of this, not Dorn and Ayers, but the leadership of the movement, blew itself up, actually, trying to build a bomb in a Manhattan townhouse. And in this Manhattan townhouse, someone made a mistake, the thing exploded, and several of the Weather Underground's leadership blew itself up in this bombing. All in all, the SDS and Students for a Democratic Society and their political allies were referred to as the New Left, which differentiated itself from the Old Left. The Old Left kind of peaked in the 1930s. The Old Left were those liberals and progressives who became communists, who supported all of the experiments in the Soviet Union, who supported Stalin, who had supported the Soviet Union in its dealings in the 1930s. They were the Old Left, kind of focused on labor unions, focused on the Cold War, not the Cold War, but focused on bringing the Soviet system to the United States. That was the Old Left. The New Left, rejected the labor unionism of the Old Left in general, and it advocated for more violent direct action. And there was a lot of arguments between the New Left and the Old Left in the 1960s, with each of them reading each other out of the leftist movement. But when you see the phrase or hear the phrase New Left, think Students for a Democratic Society, think the belief that the United States and the Soviet Union are equally bad, equally at fault for the Cold War. Think of accusations of the United States as a racist, sexist, imperialistic country that, at the very, very least needs to be totally, totally reformed from the inside to be a decent place ever again. That's the New Left.